John, do you have something to add, or because we have like plenty of questions coming in, so happy to just go into the next one, but the answers have been actually quite amazing. So John, do you have something to say?
No, nothing special, so please, maybe it's better go to the next question.
Okay, let's go with Sven.
Yes, it's maybe sort of a follow-up to the first one on the digital Earth vision and applications. And it's more connected to what Mel actually ended with in the whole series of interventions. Because very often, especially in this digital Earth community, we see almost a bias towards more technical-oriented people. I'm not saying we are all technical-oriented, but quite a few. So how do you see actually these interplay between the digital Earth vision, which has actually quite a lot of technical aspects to it, a lot of data handling, simulation, and what we heard about in terms of really engaging people, also engaging people with very different backgrounds, which don't have a certain technical literacy, for example. Do you also have some views on this to how people could actually deal with all these digital twin sensor data ecosystems and how to make this connection more natural or help people to benefit from what is emerging?
Is this directed at myself, Sven?
May start again.
Yeah, start again. Okay. How to help them? I think well, one of the things that I think becomes a really a motivator for people to get involved, aside from the motivation to make change, is access to the data, so that the data isn't only available for scientific modelling or within the system, that actually we have something called in GROW we called it the positive leaky pipeline. So that data is actually leaked out and that may be exclusively available to a community that's gathered it, or certainly available to that community and others that maybe use it in a certain way through license and by agreement or what have you, for innovation purposes, so that they're able to not only contribute to this much bigger aim, but also have the benefit of experimenting potentially with data at a hyper-local level to solve some of the issues that they might have. So I think that your other question about how can we support them, I think is dependent on the shape and the nature of the project. It's very bespoke, and I gave an example of both community management and community champions that are situated in a community. And that have a sort of framework of delivery of support, various kinds of education on the one hand, but also of training and resources and data awareness, etc. on the other. So I could talk for a long time, but I'll let somebody else come in on that.
Excellent, thanks a lot, Mel. Maybe it's also, it has a bit of a relation also to these bottom-up processes, no? Because it's a long shot from the digital ecosystem to the process that Jörn and the guys were following in putting a declaration together. But maybe can you share a few more thoughts on how you actually manage this process to engage people bottom up in your activity?
Yeah, maybe I can just elaborate a little bit more on how we can strengthen the link from the digital Earth concept to making it attractive for citizens and engaging them. And I think one path is to make it relevant, as also Mel has described in detail. But the other field, I think, and this was even mentioned today in the introduction by Alessandro Annoni, is there's a whole world out there of people engaging in video games, and a young generation is drawn into those and fascinated by these video games, which are essentially virtual worlds. So one dream could be to try to link this up more. We have been trying this actually for quite a while, not really successfully, because these communities, they don't talk so much to each other, and it's a completely different concept. But I think if we can introduce more so-called serious gaming into the gaming industry, where there is a gaming for a purpose, where you kind of blend more these virtual worlds of, with the real world, and where you try to also engage young people who might be players of those games into doing something more useful, maybe, while at the same time having the same level of fun. This could be really a very interesting entry point to making, to changing the world in the end, also engaging a community which might be initially less interested, and making it fun, using all these amazing virtual techniques we have now with using digital earth and virtual reality, for example. Augmented and virtual reality can really play a big role in that. And then, of course, also the way you design things, how you design it, how easy entry barriers you make for different communities, different age groups also. And we know that the older people have not been engaging that much in it. And there might be new innovative ways of trying to start with something simple, something they know, and then onboarding them into some more digital kind of worlds. So these are my thoughts. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Stefan. Jörn, over to you.
Yeah, maybe just also with regard to the bottom-up process and the approach to invite and to include as much people as possible. I think that every new technical structure, new technical thing like the big data or the communication platforms on the internet are able to build new visions and to build a new world and a new positive vision of the future. But on the other side, we should also every time have in mind that only well-educated citizens could successfully use this new structure, this new technical opportunities. And this is what is also to organize bottom-up processes. For this, you need well-educated and independent citizens. And this is, I think, made for the vision of a digital earth and all these good visions or the good opportunities relating to that you need a process of co-evolution. You need better educated citizens, which are independent, have a high degree on autonomy, sophisticated approach to technical structure. And on the other side, you should also use this new technological structure to have a non-closed or non-finished process to set new standards. And these standards should be every time used, should be discussed and reviewed, and then we just a new developed. And only this twofold process, the co-evolution of the technique and the use of the techniques on the one side, and the more education and the well education of the people on the other side, could bring this positive vision to practice or to the real world.
That's cool. Thank you for that input, Jörn. I have like a lot of questions here, so I will go with the Q&A section that we have here. I have some specific questions for specific members of the panel. So actually, Jörn, you are one. This is from Elsa Fonseca. Do Jörn know what platforms with geological and archaeological data of buildings? She also says that I searched some ruins.
So related to our conference, we had a lot of projects, and I guess there were also projects which have an archaeological focus. But now I haven't the right answer. So, but if you have any still more information, so please contact me and I can research search for them.
Well, thank you for that. I got a question for Mel. How do you recruit the community champions? Roughly, how many hours per month did they commit to the project?
That is a good question. So for the latest the Grow project that I spoke about just now, the community champions, we had a phased approach. So we had a first year where we had a small number of early adopters that we reached out to our kindred networks. We had a couple of NGOs and through within the project, and so we reached out for early adopters in order to build and test and overwinter the sensors. So we did a lot of validation of work with the sensors. We did some validation work alongside official monitoring stations, and we were doing things like testing the protocols and testing the distribution plan, testing the housing, the sensor housing, etc., etc. So we had a smaller number of 5 community champions to start that were either within the project itself related to our partners or very close in kindred networks where we tested everything out. And in the second year, we launched an open call, and we had, from the experience of the first year, a number of factors that we were looking for communities to come on board. And they included previous experience of kind of education initiatives, possibly access to a community hall or a meeting space that they would be able to meet up with people, and experience of hosting those kinds of events. We looked for the fit to soil moisture and what they might want to do with the data, so looking at the kind of problem that they would want to address, and that they had the ability to reach people. And we had a long debate about what we should do regarding their time input, because of course we know a lot of citizen science is volunteer, but these were sort of roles that really we were bringing in to work collaboratively with our community champions, so required a higher input. And in the end, they were required to distribute sensors, receive and distribute sensors. So we actually contracted successful communities with and the community champion themselves to do these tasks, and they were paid in kind in order to host events and given a budget in order to do that. And that's one way of doing it, not always the way. They worked with us over the course of between 1 to 2 years in order to fulfill the distribution of sensors, and some community champions oversaw the distribution of over 1,000 sensors in each of the places. So it was a very big task. So that's how we recruited, and we actually had a third year of recruitment to bring on the last cohort of community champions to fulfill our final figures. And there you see the adopters that actually were spurred on by the results of the first 2 years. So they were super keen. And by that time, we were really running very slick, a lot more slick way. We got past a lot of the bumpy technical issues and those sorts of things. And so they really could get up to speed very quickly, and with all of the resources able to work with the communities in that sense. So we had a phased approach and open calls for interested and relevant communities to come on board.
Thank you, Mel, for that one. I got another comment and also positive feedback in conjunction with 2 questions. This is from Julia Vera. So he said, thank you for the fantastic contributions. I find the combination of the scientific top-down approach, bottom-up approach very interesting. Do you have a scientific framework first, and then you thought about how to engage citizens in data gathering? That's the first question. Second one would be, do you have any examples of initiatives that started bottom up and were then picked by scientists? Thanks. Smiley face. Love the smiley face at the end.
If you want, I can start. Then we break the cycle, starting with Mel, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I got a way to deal with gender balance. She gets more airtime. Huh?
Whatever. We all think the same, so that matters more. Anyway, no, I just wanted to address that. So a lot of the activities we've been doing was more of an initial scientific question we had. So it is an answer to the question is yes. This is a scientific framework. So we do have certain problems where we have, for example, data gaps about knowing knowledge about, for example, what I have presented field strength distribution globally. And that's what we then do, and then we start the engagement process. And this, you could describe this more as a top-down scientific process. What we are then experiencing is that citizens engage to different levels. So some they see themselves more as data gatherers indeed, and some they even step up and make a contribution to a scientific paper we are preparing together with them, because they many times become co-authors. And I want to say something a little bit more generic also about this. I think we have to also acknowledge that both of these approaches, bottom-up and top-down, have their validity. For example, a very extremely successful project which was run, it was Curious Osmosis, is about measuring NO2 air quality in Flanders and in Brussels. Was extremely successful. If not, it was one of the most successful projects where most citizens, in the sense where most citizens actually were actively involved, and where you could also measure impact on the policy landscape in their voting behavior, for example, later. I mean, it's not all proven, but there is some hypothesis about that. And that was more, it was not fully top-down, but that was more or less a top-down process with a protocol where people were asked to do certain things. And then people said, yes, I want to know the air quality in front of my door. Yes, I want to know. All the scientific framework was actually given to them. And then there are other very valid and important, very bottom-up co-design procedures. And I think we have to get away from this, I call it now a bit extreme, obsession to say, you know, one only co-design only works and is the only way forward. And that has become a bit of a mantra. And I think we have to acknowledge that depending on what question we have and what we want to answer, we need to be open for all of these approaches. And the second one, that, for example, the biodiversity community. So if you look at species monitoring traditionally, you can go back to the 1900s, where people, instead of shooting birds, started to record bird species. So that was actually a big change. People did the Christmas bird count. This data, which is extremely valid and is picked up by scientists for amazing scientific analysis they are doing. So they didn't know, scientists initially, how valuable this species data would become for scientific work. So yes, there are a lot of examples of where there is initially a bottom-up process, and then it leads to some scientific output. Thanks.
Excellent. No, I think we have already a very nice discussion going here. Many interests, many questions also in the chat and the Q&A. So a lot of links are shared. A lot of thank you to all the presenters. So that's brilliant. We shared the link to the declaration already, so maybe more people sign up. Also information about the toolkit has been shared and so on. So that's all going on perfectly. I would have one question to Josef, if you're listening in. I see that the recording or the results will be shared. Will there also be a sharing of the slides or the presentations in PDF, or is it more the recording that they are going for?
Well, that will be a question to everyone on the panel. So anyone who wants to share their slides and is willing to share the slides with the audience, I'm sure they can be put on the website as such. Otherwise, the live stream on Facebook will stay there as a recording and will be accessible as well. And of course, we will try to cut the presentations into nicely manageable chunks after the sessions and make that available on the website as well.
Okay.
Let me maybe take this opportunity to point out that anyone who feels better or feels that it's easier to phrase a question orally, you just might want to raise your hand. You will find your hand to be raised by opening the participant tab in the bottom right of your screen, and then a panel opens up, and on the bottom of that there is a hand which you can raise, and then we can give you a voice outside of the Q&A as well. So that's an invitation to chime in for everyone who wants to speak up.
Oh, yeah, that would be brilliant. There's not only us speaking, hearing someone from the audience would be ideal. So if anybody wants to step up, please go ahead. I don't know if what we will see if somebody raises a hand, or is it Josef, is it you?
We should see a hand and we can then open the mic for them.
Okay, anybody wants to ask a question in person?
I cannot see any hands coming.
That's fine. So as long as there are no hands coming, we have more questions. It's great already to have you all here, and we can grill you a little bit. So that's really appreciated. There was also a question on funding for these projects. How do we actually have these projects? Which is the nature of these projects? Maybe I turn it a bit more general. These things you are presenting, and also what you experienced at the SDG conference. Is it projects which just run a few weeks or a year, or is there also something which really is maintained and runs for a longer period of time? So who would like to jump on that one?
I can start from my overview, from the point of from the position of an overview. I can say that there are a lot of projects which are already organized for time period of 3 years, for example. Yes, so these are the normal timeline for research projects. Maybe some general words about opportunity to fund in such projects also from the perspective that research funders or research strategies should or could support such projects and give them money. I think there is first the problem that if research or if funders from the sphere of policymakers, for example, like to support citizen science because they are now have the picture that citizen science are great contributions, make a great contribution to the SDGs, that this should be also put into main strategies for research funding policy. And therefore, I think, what is my opinion, is that we have a lot of successful citizen science projects and a lot of opportunities. We also learned today for specific contribution of citizen science for specific data monitoring and so on. And the challenge, I think, is that especially for the policymakers, is to organize strategies which could be also give money to such initiatives, and therefore I think the main challenge is that we should bring order to citizen science and to the contributions of citizen science for SDGs. And so we have there, of course, a lot of approaches, and in the process, in the bottom-up process for the declaration, we deal with, or we played with the approach that we should take 3 or 4 main groups of the SDGs, which are related to environment, economy, social sphere, and so on. And then we should look into these special spheres or these special groups of the SDGs, or the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. And for these specific groups, we should then organize or then should be organized or should be develop strategies for research funding for citizen science. So this is one approach to just bring order to this field of a lot of projects, global, local, national, on these different levels. And I think this should be a main step for the next research strategy or for the next years for policymakers to develop a systematic approach to support citizen science.
Very good. I think it speaks a lot to this framework of research funding as compared to other funding mechanisms. Any more thoughts on sustainability? Or not everything may have to be sustained? Any reaction to that?
Maybe just one point. What I wanted to add to this. So indeed, I think not everything has to be sustainable, but I think what is sometimes helpful, and already Jörn has alluded to it, is if it is clear and obvious to the policymaker that there is a benefit to have the citizen science activities, that there is a mechanism and a type of funding, longer-term funding stream found for those, that needs to happen. And there needs to be some kind of institutionalization of that. And I think it is happening to some degree in Europe. I can see it also with respect to some of the Green Deal. Europe, I think, made quite a major step forward in fleshing out all the different documents around this Green Deal, where citizen science is actually playing an important role, and this is part of it. But the other one is just one example, which is a really successful example. It was actually just published. I will try to find the link and paste the paper in the chat box. Has just been published. It's on a case study in Venice, around the Venice two basins actually, where it's, I think, for the first time to that large extent, I think it's altogether 5 million, 2.5 million for each of those catchment areas where citizen science activities are seen as an official data stream for flood monitoring, where of course awareness raising and preparedness is an important component, and where an initial cost benefit analysis of that has been done, showing that it's actually cheaper if you invest in citizen science, even for the overall benefit, than when you use traditional approaches. So that's something I will put in. So that's an example where, you know, it is the awareness is there, the willingness of the policy is there, and where people have managed to actually convince the policymakers to put money on the table. And, you know, should there be successful projects, I think there should be a mechanism found. For example, in the Curious Innosa project, even the director of the European Environmental Agency tried actually for quite a while to replicate. It still didn't happen, which is a bit of a shame. So it's something we need to better understand why, and hopefully in the future there will be more of those more agile ways of funding certain promising citizen science activities.
Very well.
Thanks.
Before going back maybe to another, if Luis has another question, I don't know. Just to react to that one, because there was a recent publication also on starting a theory about the spreading and scaling of citizen science, which is indeed interesting to see what are the success stories to scale up or to spread successful initiatives. So indeed, the example mentioned on the Curious Innosa and the European Environment Agency is interesting, because they actually succeeded to replicate parts of this work in different schools across the EU, but also only to some extent. So it's really interesting to dive deeper into these different cases and start putting things into more structure. Also, as maybe a provocative statement, it's also a question, some of these citizen science initiatives don't want to be institutionalized. No? So there is also actually an aspect in several projects where citizen sensing, for example, happens because people want to create evidence to stress their local governments. So we were investing a few very interesting cases about water pollution and farmers, for example, which even examine the kidneys of their sheep to really show the environmental damage done by polluted water. Anyway, not to get lost in those many exciting details. I'm sure we can fill an entire conference with it. Luis, do you have more questions?
I have one here. Actually, it was on the Q&A. I just trying to reword it a little bit. So this is for all the panelists about what do you see? This is from Lee. What do you see as the top 2 policy challenges related to citizen science based on your work? This is more also, if you could make a recommendation, I will say in this case to perhaps your government administrations in various different countries, what recommendations will be regarding citizen science, what would it be?
Oh, that's a Leah question. I could tell without reading the name, but I just cross-checked.
Yes.
So that's Leah Shanley from the US.
May I can interrupt and say, yeah, I think one very impressive tool for further support of citizen science, especially to contribute to SDGs, it's what we said is that to start the process of mainstreaming citizen science as a normal part of citizen engagement on the one side, and of course of the normal academic science on the other side. And therefore we could just think about good instruments to bring this relationship to a fruitful on a fruitful, or we could state this on a fruitful base. And therefore, for example, I see maybe, or this the recommendation to institutionalize, so we could say we could call it citizen science competence centers, for example, which are based in local but also national and global level. And in these competence centers, citizens could be found in program of education for citizen science, for example, but also in good structure or good approach for communication. This is what Sven, of course, said, that many citizen scientists are not ready to institutionalize themselves as an organization. But these competence centers could institutionalize are the channels of communication between citizen scientists and the public sphere, and then for also the public policymakers. And so this, in my opinion, this is a good step forward if we try to establish such kind of citizen science competence centers on all levels, and which could be support the enterprise of citizen science.
That's you're thinking along the same lines, but I'm thinking at a much younger age, I guess. One of the things that we have done in GROW, and also the current project actually where I'm working with Stefan, is using education resources, using education programs to train people in all sorts of aspects of citizen science. And we've done that through massive open online courses or MOOCs. But I see increasingly we're thinking about the younger generation and about the education of science in school setting. And I think there's a huge opportunity to reframe science as a questioning of the world, and training our young people on how to answer their own questions, how to come up with their own questions, how to create hypotheses, and how to begin to investigate that, getting out of the classroom and from behind the screen and out into the real world, in order to do that, if that's of interest to them. We had a facet of that in GROW where people had hypotheses and went out to test them, and that was particularly in terms of permaculture validation. So it was a really powerful way of people getting involved, and I think we also see that people engaging don't see what they're doing as science. They actually don't talk about science. they don't realize sometimes actually what they're doing is science and is validating is a validation of science, and they certainly see experts as scientists in white lab coats, but so democratizing that a little more and bringing it into schools in a different way and teaching science in a different way, I think would be incredibly valuable.
That's cool. Stefan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, maybe I will try to continue on the provocative side, if that is okay. Just to add what Mel said, not to be provocative to Mel. I fully underscore what she said. I think what is really critical is, and I'm also there in line with Jorn, is the educational part and the lifelong learning part. And I think, to set up maybe lifelong learning centers in the US, in some places where citizen science can be reborn in some places, like where we were very worried, by the way, about the US election. We are quite happy that it's the Biden administration and not another one. For example, what happened in Florida, why did that happen, what happened in Florida, and to understand that, but to try to maybe also for the Democrats, to understand a little bit more, where those places, for example, farmers, this links very much to the GROW project. Are there maybe some ways to reach out to new communities, which until now, those more educated people and universities have not yet done and not managed? Can we find new ways, as also Mel has said, of engaging some completely new communities in some type of science? Even they might not even realize that it's science, in something which touches them, which is important for them, where we can get more. I think the overall challenge in the US in particular is really education. It's really basic education and critical thinking. I think that's something which the Biden administration has to work on, and citizen science can for sure play a role there. Thanks.
That's definitely interesting comments there from the three of you guys. So on these questions, definitely a lot to think, a lot to take, and a lot of takens for certain. There is a question that it has come up. Sven and I, we have been thinking about this one for quite a long time as well, and we haven't definitely put it out there. And based on the presentations that we have today, and based on the forum that we are at the moment, I'm thinking about ISDE, or the International Society of Digital Earth. So the question that Sven and I will have, and Sven, please feel free to complement the question, is for the panelists, for the three of you, which role will you see for ISDE to contribute? Sven?
Yeah, exactly. So this is our second big question. Huh? We saw now in your presentations, but also in the discussion, which very impressively unfolded. I have to say, thanks for all of your contributions. That there is a lot already going on, and many groups do exist. But of course, as part of this society for Digital Earth, we also ask ourselves, what can we do to contribute to the bigger picture? And among others, actually next year, and actually Josef will be again a kind host next year, hopefully in person. There will be also the next Digital Earth Symposium in Salzburg. So in 1 year time, a bit less actually, there would be another milestone. We really want to understand what as a society we could bring to this topic on citizen engagement, citizen science, let's say over the next year. So you're 1 minute per person. What do you want us to do? And do you see a role for ISDE, given that it's already a very rich landscape out there? Please. We like to close with the tricky question. Here you go.
And definitely not all at the same time, for certain. So should we pick, like, I don't know, George, would you like to start, or Mel, or Stefan?
Maybe I start very generally, because just start with the general view, and then we can go further to Mel and the others with a specific focus on citizen science. Well, I think any idea start with a public process of communication. So we just now talk about the opportunity of citizen science and the need to support citizens, the SDGs and so on. We need a more equal process of communication on the world and on a global level. And therefore, we should look forward how we could, or is it possible to organize such a new public sphere? Because we need strong science on the one hand, we need also strong citizens on the other hand. And only with the communication process between these two sides, we can then have a systematical search or initiate a systematical search on the specific contributions of one to another. And I think that the technical infrastructure or the technical network or the technical foundation of such a public sphere should be organized that we also have no barriers for people to join this process of communication, and it should also find or rise the view of the people to deal with these problems, to see this as an opportunity. And this is also not just an offer for communication, but also not just an invitation for communication, but also a strong political argument for communication. And this should have an equal approach, and it should be also have no barriers, also on the political sphere, that we can say we should, because when we talk about the opportunity, the contribution of citizen science for the SDGs, this is of course a question of data research or monitoring and scientific questions as well. But what we do with, or what is possible to do with these results for the sustainable development, this is of course then a political question. And here we come to my presentation back, and then I will finish. Is that we have now the declaration for the support of for citizen science for the SDGs. This now is just a document from a scientific perspective. But now we need the next step. This is to politicize, politicize this document, to make this transform this to a political document. And this is of course a main challenge. And now we need scientific standards, but democratic standards. And therefore, I think the Digital Earth could be a very good infrastructure to enable such a process of communication.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Jörn. So we take this as your final statement because we're towards the end of the session. Very well done. Who wants to shoot next? Stefan or Mel?
I'll jump in very briefly. I think, of course, I've got to talk about co-design because, of course, that's something, or co-creation, and that's something I believe passionately is the way in which to bring people together. And I think Jörn's hinted at that. There are a number of communities of practice, some of which have emerged out of, we observe the project itself, and some colleagues are running those currently, and one on the SDGs that has been particularly successful, run by Dilek, Fraser also from IASA, Stefan's colleague, and others around open science, etc. And so I think these communities of practice are out there and are very welcoming spaces to bring people together. There are also the existing biannual conferences and other types of conferences. We all know about Earth observation, but also EXA and other communities that are existing. And I think it is about making those connections, and whether Digital Earth needs a new community of interest in the start to co-design the possible goals of such an endeavour, bringing citizen science and Digital Earth together might be an interesting question, but also engaging with some of these existing and highly successful communities would be a way forward. Bringing that into the kind of political strategies of the next few years, including the Green Deal, and I know here in the UK There's going to be a number of announcements from the government, also in very shortly actually, around biodiversity in particular. Then there is a developing and moving and deepening picture driven by our citizens themselves and what they want to see happen in the world. And so it is not always necessarily about setting up something new, but a renewed effort to engage with what's there and also test whether from your side to create a community that's outward facing, bringing people in, would be my advice.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Mel. That's very useful, very helpful and actionable. We have 2 more minutes before the next session. So I'm sorry for everybody who wanted to take a break between this one and the education and capacity building, but we were taken away. But I think it was a very useful discussion already, and I think it will feed into some follow-up activity and also preparations for the symposium. So, Stefan, do you want to leave us with a few words?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Thanks a lot. I just noticed that I hadn't copied. I pasted now to everybody these 2 things. Also, the communities of practice, which was mentioned by Mel. Yeah, thanks a lot. I think I have not much to add. I think this is a very good point. So linking up existing communities, starting the conversation, and I think with this session you already have started this process. So that's was already a move into that direction. And then maybe just to add what I said before, I don't know really, but I'm just thinking loud here now, if maybe the community around Digital Earth could play some role of leveraging also the connection with industry. I think industry, as we have also heard from one of the presentations, has really moved the Digital Earth forward a lot, with Google Earth just as one of many other examples where industry has played an important role. And I'm just wondering that if also with for example, the gaming industry is a massive business, and it's kind of now blending more and more with also the digital Earth kind of concept of virtual reality. So I'm thinking if maybe there could be some leverage on trying to link also industry and citizens more closely together in, for example, designing really new, cool, serious games where there is really a purpose, a game with a purpose. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm just, as said, I'm just thinking loud here just to add and to.
Okay. No, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you short here, but yeah, perfect. Yeah. Very well. Thanks again to everybody, to all in this session, and also the many people answering and asking questions all over. Joseph, we are done, and we are ready to hand over to you for your next session.
Okay.
There you go.
Sven and Louis for moderating, and all the panelists, as well as everyone participating so actively. I believe this really was a wonderful session, and I'm glad we could have it in this format. There was a question, what happens to all the links? We have collected them, and we can consolidate these, and we'll make these available through the website. So we are moving straight over to the next session, the Digital Earth Education and Capacity Building. But if you need to rush away for a quick topic off for coffee or any other media, then please do so right now while we are switching over to the next panel. But don't get lost. We'll get started in a minute or so.